Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game, and you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now this week we are going to be talking about a few new cards, and we're going to be talking all about the best uses for Mega Turbo. More on that in a little bit. Now it's not something I'm going to try and put in play this week, because I need to go and find out and give you guys really clear instructions. But after finding out, about Nationals, now if you missed last week's podcast, essentially I'm not playing Nationals this year. I'm going to be kind of doing some kind of hybrid mini presenter commentating Nationals kind of thing, picking feature matches and hopefully getting them out on the stream and doing a little bit of announcing at Nationals. Don't know exactly what it's going to be, but it sounds like fun. Now, it occurs to me, this is more of a kind of, it's going to be something more for next year, but I want to try and get the ball rolling this year. Because Worlds, it's just starting with a little rant, as we do. Worlds is a truly international event, if you ignore the fact it's always held in the US. But you can understand why it's always held in the US. I mean, I know one year they did go to Vancouver, which is technically over the border into Canada, as little as they can possibly get from the Pokemon head office in Seattle. But I can understand that. From a logistics point of view, it makes perfect sense to hold it in the US. Plus, for those that don't know, Japanese players really like to go on holiday, so they don't want it in Japan, and it wouldn't make sense in Japan anyway. The US just makes the most sense. So I can understand that. But you go to Worlds and you've got players from all over the world, translators from all over the world, judges from all over the world, and commentators from the USA. Only from the USA. This seems wrong to me. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do over the next kind of couple of weeks is send in support tickets through the Pokemon website. Now, if you already know how to do this, go and send a support ticket, essentially just saying that you think it's wrong that the World Championships, which is so international in every other aspect, has entirely US commentators. And if you want to suggest me as an alternative, not going to complain. Not going to lie, would love to commentate Worlds, but honestly, I'd just be happy with seeing a non-American, and that's not some kind of weird xenophobic kind of thing. It's purely, I really like I really like Worlds as a truly international event. When I've been in the past, it's been a truly international event. You get there and the first thing you're greeted with is signs saying welcome in, every language of that's represented at Worlds itself. And it annoys me that they only have American commentators. By all means, have people talking completely in English, which is the primary language of the Pokemon company. Fine. But let's have a non-American voice in there. And yes, I would like it to be me. We're going to talk more about it in the coming weeks as we go up to Worlds. Obviously, nothing's going to happen this year, but I would love it if, thanks to listeners of my podcast, amongst others, we could get a non-American commentator at Worlds next year. And yes, obviously, I would very much like that to be me. And given that I'm hopefully going to be, assuming the technology holds up, commentating at UK Nationals this year, I think I'm now, and I've been doing the podcast for 3 years, I think I'm now in a position where I can rightly claim to be the kind of person that should be considered for this. Even last year, when they held, they essentially held online auditions for it. They made it very clear that you could only audition if you were American, and that made very little sense to me. By all means, if you're paying for, travel for people, cap the amount you can claim for travel if you're coming from outside the US so you don't go over budget. That's fine. By all means, make sure that you can speak English and you have an accent which is readily understood by people who speak English. If you want to do an English language stream, that's fine. But there's plenty of people that fit into those categories that aren't American. Hey-ho. So going to the news this week, I'll say more on that in future weeks. Going to the news this week, there's a kind of boring piece of news. There is a Mega Master Deck Builder box coming out in Japan. And they are going to have essentially a Speed Style collection featuring Kyogre, or a Power Style collection featuring Groudon. And essentially, if you buy both decks, or both boxes, you have a couple hundred cards, and it kind of helps you to make decks. Not very exciting for us, to be honest, because when it came out, the last one of these came out was in 2012, and it had the previously English exclusive artwork for Rayquaza EX, Darkrai EX, and Mewtwo EX. So we got them in our tins, and then they ended up in Japan in these collections. So some, previously English exclusive artwork, for instance, from the tins, because we get the alternate artwork tins that Japan doesn't get. So it's not exciting for us, but people in Japan should be quite excited. But there are some promo cards which have been released, and we should be a little bit excited about those. So there are a couple of promos coming out in Japan. And they are going to be All Night Party and Umbreon. Now, the Umbreon's kind of rubbish. It's a stage 1, and the attacks are kind of garbage. It's got an interesting one for a Dark Double Colourless, which does 60 damage, and you can turn one of your face-down prize cards up. If it's a Pokemon, you do 120 damage, and it stays face-up. But still, 120 damage for free energy is hardly amazing. We've got Wally, which helps to get stage 1s out in one turn or on the first turn of the game. And let's not forget, we've got the Eevee, where you can just attach a Dark Energy and evolve into Umbreon. It's still underpowered. The better card, the other attack does 30 and is not affected by resistance for a Dark and a Colourless. Woo. Yeah. Aren't there many cards around that resist Dark? But the more interesting one is All Night Party. It's a stadium, and as we've seen, stadiums are very important at the moment. Pretty much every deck has a stadium it's revolving around. From Dimension Valley to Burbank City Gym to Rough Seas to Skyridge, etc. They're getting very, very big. An all-night stadium reads, once during each player's turn, that player may remove the special condition Asleep from his or her active Pokemon. If that player does, heal 30 damage from that Pokemon. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is an almost shamelessly anti-hypnotoxic laser stadium. Because that's what it does. It directly counters hypnotoxic laser. It's a stadium which gets rid of sleep and heals 30 damage, which, if Burbank City Gym is out, is how much you will have gotten from poison since your opponent poisoned you. I like this. It's kind of cool. I don't know how many people are going to play it, if I'm honest. Sleep is not a huge problem outside of hypnotoxic laser. But even then, are you going to be that worried about laser that you're not going to play Rough Seas in a Kyogre deck, that you're not going to play Dimension Valley in a Psychic deck, that you're not going to play Burbank City Gym in your own deck? I don't think this is going to see a huge amount of play. I'd quite like to be wrong. It's a cool little stadium. But I really don't see it as a card that's likely to see a huge amount of play. Now, going on to other promos. Now, these aren't out yet. These are going to be from Bandit Ring, or as it's going to be known in the UK, or the US, Ancient Origins. So this is our August set we're going to be getting this. So think post-Nationals, post-Worlds. And there are 3 EXs which have been revealed. Firstly, there is another Kyurem EX. If you didn't like the Kyurem EX that came out in Next Destinies, and you didn't like the other Kyurem EX, and the set for that, for the life of me, I can't remember, the one that's got Super Outrage. If you didn't like either of those 2 Water Kyurem EXs, and you didn't like the Black and White Kyurem EXs, that we've had 2 of each, do not despair. There is another Kyurem EX coming out. And just like the other 2, it's not very good. It's got 2 attacks, 180 HP, weak to metal, as we'd be expecting. Water Colourless, Frozen World, 30 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. That's even worse than Glaciate. Because at least Glaciate hit the active as well, if I remember correctly. Don't like it, not good, underpowered, and, that the regular Kyurem was released in Legendary Treasures, and we had a reprint of it, so it's going to be staying around for a little while now. So why we need another Kyurem, an EX, which has essentially got the same attack, I don't understand. It was Plasma Blast, by the way, that the Outrage Kyurem came out in. It was Plasma Blast. So that one's going to be, their next format. It's like they were scared we were only going to have one legal Kyurem. So, they released another. Not to mention the 2 black Kyurem EX, the 2 white Kyurem EXs, etc., etc. I don't know, maybe they just seem to really like Kyurem, I suppose. I mean, he's kind of a cool Pokemon. Yeah, and I've just checked on the Legendary Treasures one. It hits the active as well, so you get 50 more HP. The attack costs exactly the same, so you're adding 50 HP and you're not hitting the active, and you're giving up an extra prize. I don't like it. The other attack for free water and a colourless does 130 damage. Discard 1 energy attached to this Pokemon. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't attack. Now, this is a little more interesting. Now, 130, even with a Muscle Bang, goes up to 150. You need Verbank Laser to one-hit KO an EX. And 4 energy is a lot, although remember we've got Blastoise, which I know isn't perfect, but he at least works. The fact that the defending Pokemon can't attack. I mean, there was a Beartic released a little while ago that had a similar kind of stops your opponent attacking that everyone was trying to use. It never worked. It never got particularly good. But, you know, there's potential here. Now, remember the defending Pokemon, if you retreat to the bench, it's no longer the defending Pokemon. So, Caldeo, rush in and retreat, or a switch, or even just a regular retreat is going to get rid of that. So do bear in mind there's an awful lot of ways to get around that. But at least that second attack is quite interesting. Speaking of interesting, Lugia EX, 170 HP. Now, it's got a resistance to fighting, but it's weak to lightning. With Rayquaza getting so much hype at the moment, that's going to make lightning decks good, which is going to make this weakness bad. But remember that we've got the Altaria with Delta Evolution, which removes weakness from colourless Pokemon and can be evolved on your first turn and indeed the first turn of the game. So you can use that to get rid of Lugia's lightning weakness. Now, it's got 2 attacks, one for 4 colourless energy, Deep Hurricane, 80 damage. If there's a stadium in play, it does 150 and discard the stadium. As we know, ladies and gentlemen, in the game as it is at the moment, the chances of there being a stadium in play are ridiculously high. At a muscle band, you're doing 170, you're looking pretty good there. So, good, but 4 colourless energy. You know, you could stick it into pretty much any deck which accelerates energy. You could put it into a metal deck, but then again, Dialga would just plain be better. Or you could put it into a Blastoise deck, but again, Caldeo is going to be better. So, I don't love it. What's really intriguing, though, is they've got X-Ball as its first attack. Now, they've misspelt it. They've spelt it Aero Ball, but it's X-Ball. 20 damage times the number of energy attached to this Pokemon and the defending Pokemon. We all know how good X-Ball is. This will also be potentially very good. Remember, though, that this isn't Mewtwo, because Mewtwo is weak to itself creating a Mewtwo Wars. That won't happen with Lugia. Remember also that Mewtwo, although superbly amazing when it first came out, has, as the game's moved on since the release of Next Destinies, Mewtwo has become less and less relevant and less played. So just because it's got the same attack as Mewtwo, and Mewtwo took over the format for a time, I don't think that's going to be the same. And finally, Hooper EX. It's got 1 attack for 3 Psychic Energy, Hyperspace Fury. Discard 2 energy attached to this Pokemon, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon, and this attack does 100 damage to that Pokemon. I'd rather have Latios, because at least the discarding 2 energy can be done with a Double Dragon. It's 3 Psychic, so you can't use Dimension Valley. It's too expensive, it's not going to work very well, it's not a Mega EX, so you can't use Mega Turbo. It's never going to see any use. What it will see use as, and it has got a retreat cost of 2, which is going to be relevant, because I can see people using it for the ability. Once during your turn, when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may use this ability. Search your deck for up to 3 Pokemon EX, show them to your opponent, and put them into your hand. This, ladies and gentlemen, is spectacular. Now, let's imagine that you've got Winona and you are playing a colourless deck. Now, the only downside of Hooper is that you're not going to be able to have... You know, he's not coloured, so you can't search him with Winona. But what you can do is, for instance, search for, let's say, a Swablu, an Altaria, and a Shaman. Then you play the then you've got your Altaria already up to get rid of your weakness. Then you play the Shaman to draw some cards, and then hopefully you're going to be able to draw into your Hooper, and then your Hooper can get you 2 Rayquaza and a Mega Rayquaza, or indeed a Rayquaza, a Mega Rayquaza, and another Shaman. So, yes, you can't search it with Winona, but in a Rayquaza deck, you can really search for a lot of Pokemon very quickly using Hooper. And if you're going to have Shaman on your bench, they are going to be catcher targets or Lysandra targets, so it doesn't really matter if you just have one more Lysandra target on your bench. Not to mention that you're going to have up to 8 Pokemon with your Stadium, and the fact that if the Stadium goes away, you can discard Pokemon from your bench, and one of them can be Hooper anyway. I say you can discard, you'll need to discard if you've got more than 4. I like Hooper. The other thing is, you can use this with, Pokemon Fan Club, search for 2 Pokemon, we'll make one of them Hooper, and then you're actually searching for, in total, 4 Pokemon. Because you're essentially searching for 3 with the Hooper, plus the non-Hooper for Pokemon Fan Club. So in addition to Hooper, you are searching for 4 Pokemon, as long as you're okay with 3 of them being EXs. Hooper is, from an ability standpoint, it's just more consistency. and more consistency is good. We've already had Jirachi, we've already had Shaymin. Now, Hooper was only leaked, I think it leaked today. So I haven't had, the internet hasn't had much chance to react to this. But honestly, I've not been seeing people going crazy for this card, and it's a bench sitter, and that's annoying, but so's Jirachi, and so's Shaymin, and Hooper's got 170 HP as opposed to Jirachi's 90 and Shaymin's 110. I don't like the attack, I don't think it's going to see a huge amount of play, but I love the ability. It can turn an Ultra Ball into free Shaymin. It can turn an Ultra Ball into a Shaymin, a Rayquaza, and a Mega Rayquaza. It can turn an Ultra Ball into, a Dragon Rayquaza and a Mega Dragon Rayquaza and a Shaymin. It can turn an Ultra Ball into 3 of your Seismitoads, so you're not going to run out of Seismitoads anytime soon. You see where I'm going with this. It turns an Ultra Ball from 1 Pokemon into essentially 3 Pokemon. I'm not counting Hooper because you only get Hooper to get the others. I love that ability on that Hooper. It is lovely. So today I set myself a little bit of a research task. Like I did a couple of weeks ago when we looked at speed decks through the ages, I set myself a little bit of a research task, and the research task I basically set myself was, what cards are going to be good with Mega Turbo? Now this all came about because when I went through Mega Turbo in the podcast, I gave some examples of cards that could be used with Mega Turbo, and quite rightly I should add, I had a few people tweeting me or emailing me going, hang on a second, you didn't mention this card. And then I came back on the podcast last week and I acknowledged what people had said, and I essentially said, well, I wasn't looking to give you an exhaustive list. And there hasn't been anything major happening in the Pokemon TCG this week, so I set myself a little research project. I'm going to hopefully do more of these as we go through. Any suggestions, as always, tweet me at the Wassy, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, and I will happily get to these kind of projects. So just let me know what you want to know, essentially. So I decided to have a look at all the Mega EXs, and I've gone for all 22. And that includes the unreleased promos, and the promos which we're going to be getting at some point, but we don't have yet. So we're going to be looking at Swampert EX, Blaziken EX, Megas of course, the other Mega Gengar, and Mega Absol. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we're looking at promos, unreleased promos, and all the ones from the sets. And if my counting is correct, there's 22 in total, but don't worry, it's not going to take too long. Although again, whenever I say about long, people just tell me to stop moaning, so I won't say a word. Now, when we talk about Mega EXs, there is a very clear distinction that needs to be made. Mega EXs that have a Spirit Link, and Mega EXs that don't. Now, Spirit Link is the Pokemon tool that you attach to your EX, and it means you don't end your turn when you Mega Evolve. That was, I made this point when Mega EXs first came out, when X and Y dropped, I was not very enthusiastic about Mega EXs, because what I essentially said was, look, you're giving up a turn to evolve them, you're ending your turn to evolve them, and you've got to wait a turn to evolve them, and after all of that, they kind of suck. So I'm going to start off with the ones that don't have Spirit Links, and again, for the unreleased ones, I can't tell you with certainty, but I can give you a pretty good guess. As in, I'm like 99% sure I'm right. So we'll see if any stand up. So, starting off in X and Y, we're going to go set by set here. In X and Y, we had Mega Blastoise and Mega Venusaur. Mega Blastoise EX has 1 attack, and quite frankly, it's not very good. 120 damage for free water energy, and it does 30 damage to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Yeah, it's decent for spread, and yeah, you're doing 120, but even with a muscle band on that bad boy, you're doing 140 and 30 to 2 of the bench. If there's no Mr. Mime, if they don't heal, if they're not playing Rough Seas, etc. I don't like, and if I'm playing Mega Blastoise, I'm probably going to want to play Rough Seas myself. That attack is not terribly good, and even if you add in the fact that if there was a Spirit Link, I wouldn't like it. The fact that there isn't a Spirit Link, I cannot recommend it. The more interesting one is Venusaur. Now, he also has no Spirit Link, but he has 1 attack for 120 damage for free grass and a colourless. Your opponent's active is now paralysed and poisoned. Automatic paralysis is huge. Absolutely huge. We saw this with decks like Vanillux, and with, Matt Blower managed to take that to the top 4 of UK Nationals a couple of years ago. If you're listening, Matt, hello. Also, we've seen decks like Exalgor, and I know that a lot of these paralysis decks in recent years have been paralysis combined with, for instance, Trainer Lock. But to be perfectly honest with you, if you don't have a switch or something like that, then it doesn't matter if you're Trainer Locked or not. Biggest problem with Mega Venusaur EX is it takes 4 energy, and if you're accelerating energy with Grass, you're using Virizion, and you might as well use Genesect because you can do 200 damage, get the 1-hit KO, and not have to end a turn Mega Evolving. Perfect. Here, you don't wait. You are wasting a turn Mega Evolving, but you can use Mega Turbo to attach Grass energy from your discard pile. If we had a Spirit Link, I think Mega Venusaur would be a brilliant one to try, because you no longer need to worry about 1-hit KOing because you've got Paralysis. Oh yeah, and did I mention it poisons as well? The biggest and when Venusaur came out, that was the one. Nobody really liked Blastoise from the beginning, for a pretty good reason, to be honest. When we had a look at and then Venusaur, people looked at Venusaur, and it looked interesting, but it was just too expensive and too slow, and I'm afraid that kind of still counts. Now, Flashfire was the last of the proper sets. Excuse me, no it wasn't, but Flashfire was another set that didn't have Spirit Links, and it again had 2 Mega EXs. There was a Fire and a Dragon Charizard, both of whom did 300, and what I'm going to say about them is very similar. So the Fire Charizard for 2 fire and 3 colourless does 300 damage and 50 damage to itself. Now you can use double colourless energy, and you can use Blacksmith, and this gives it advantages as well as Mega Turbo. Now that we've got things like Shaman, so we can draw with Pokémon, and you've still got your whole kind of Scorched Earth as your stadium, discard a fire energy, draw 2 cards, you can... Blacksmith gets better, because the less reliant we are on drawing with supporters, then the more reliant we can be on, supporters that don't draw, like Blacksmith. So Mega Turbo could help with Mega Charizard, but it's still 5 energy. Now I know you can use DCE and Blacksmith as well, but it's 5 energy, and then you're doing 50 damage to yourself, so you're making it easier to kill yourself. The problem is, the new Dragon Rayquaza, which I'm going to get to in a minute, also does 300 damage for 5 energy, but it's got the Reshiram, which is easier to use than Blacksmith, and it's got Double Dragon, which is the same as Double Colourless, and it doesn't damage itself. You just discard 2 energy, which is just the Double Dragon. I don't like the Dragon... No, I take that back. I do like the Fire Charizard. But the biggest problem with the Fire Charizard is it damages itself, and it's just not as easy to use as Dragon Rayquaza. And I'm going to say the exact same thing about Mega Charizard EX. The other one, the Dragon one, does 300 damage, but you discard 5 cards from your deck for 2 fire, a dark, and a double colourless. Now, you can use double colourless, and you can use double dragon energy. And, of course, you can still use something like Scorched Earth, because you'll be playing basic fire. And you can still use the Reshiram to attach fire energy from your hand. But you're better off just using a Dragon Rayquaza. Oh, by the way, the one thing I didn't mention, well, I did, but not specifically in relation to this, Dragon Rayquaza has a Spirit Link. So when you add in the fact it's got a Spirit Link, it doesn't have some ridiculous effect which will cripple you in the long run. I just prefer Dragon Rayquaza. I'd rather have the Dragon Pokemon with Double Dragon and Reshiram than I would have Blacksmith and Double Colourless as well. So they're both interesting cards, and they're not terrible. I don't want anyone thinking that I hate these cards, they're workable, but we still come back to the same problem of, do you really want to be playing a Mega EX that doesn't have a Spirit Link? And the answer is, well yeah. Honestly, you might. But the problem is, you're going to have a really, really good reason for playing it. You're going to have an amazing card, which is going to warrant it. And I don't honestly know that they do. And that's the big problem for me. That's the thing that I kind of essentially can't get past. Because you're losing a turn. And losing a turn is not the end of the world. As long as you've got something else that you can use to back up what you're doing. And if you don't, then you're really going to be onto a loser before you've even started there. So I do apologise. I don't mean to be rude. I just don't like it. Now, I said 22 Mega EXs. I've missed one. There's actually 23. Because I forgot about Mega Kangaskhan EX. But the problem with Mega Kangaskhan was never lack of energy. You've got to lose a turn because you've got no Spirit Link, and it takes free energy. So energy, double colourless. Or people played it in Aromatisse, where you'd use Geomancy to get energy on the board, and then you'd use your Aromatisse to kind of flit the energy onto Mega Kangaskhan. And, of course, it's a flippy attack. 100 damage, flip till you get a tails, 30 damage for each heads. So it's not that it's a terrible card. Again, it's seen a bit of use. This one has seen a little bit of play. But if I'm being perfectly honest, there's a reason it doesn't see play anymore. And if you're thinking, well, hang on a second, he's just saying for all of them they're not good enough and they don't have a Spirit Link. Unfortunately, that's what they were first time round, but I want to take another look at these cards because I want to give you an exhaustive list. So finishing off with the sets that didn't have Spirit Links, we've got Mega Heracross EX. Free energy, 180 damage, minus 10 for each damage counter on this Pokemon. Now let's not forget that we've got the Dusknoir at the moment, which allows you to take energy from the active Pokemon to Dusknoir. So you can keep Heracross free of damage and do 180 damage. If Heracross had a Spirit Link, I'd really like him. Free energy is not that much, especially when you start chucking down Mega Turbos. 180 damage is brilliant, especially when you get a Muscle Band on. A Muscle Band on there to do 200. And then you can even start adding Laser and Burbank to, one-hit KO Mega EXs. For free energy, that's pretty good, and you would need to keep him free of any damage, and you're going to need the Dusknoir for that. That's the Stage 2 one that allows you to move damage counters from the active onto Heracross. I think Heracross has a little bit of potential. But then again, if you want a free energy grass Pokemon, maybe use Genesect. Having said that, with, more and more cards coming out all the time that can KO EXs on kind of turn 2, stopping you ever using Emerald Slash, with Heracross, you just need to go, Heracross, energy, and then a couple of Mega Turbo, and you're there. You can get him going in one turn. And finally, Mega Lucario. I do not like Mega Lucario with Mega Turbo, and there's a very good reason for that. The attack does 140 damage for free fighting energy. So then you add on Muscle Band, you're doing 160. You add on Fighting Stadium, you're doing 180. Okay, that's pretty good. But the problem is, there's a lot that resist fighting, and that won't get the KO. Not only are there a lot that resist fighting, think of... And we're talking big ones, we're talking Evil Tower, we're talking Rayquaza. So you're down to 160. Not only that, but you've got Mega EXs now. The really good thing about Mega Lucario is using strong energy. Mega Lucario is best when using strong energy, and Mega Turbo doesn't add strong energy. So I'm afraid I can't really endorse Mega Lucario, because even with Muscle Band Fighting Stadium, you're doing 180 if the opponent doesn't have resistance. And honestly, in the format we're in at the moment, a lot has fighting resistance. And again, there's no Spirit Link. Now, I keep saying this thing about there's no Spirit Link. So maybe I need to be, essentially, what do we do about that? What can we do about the fact that we don't have a Spirit Link? Good question. Essentially, any card that's used for a hit and run deck, by which I mean Donphan and Gengar, the ones that hit the active and switch back to the bench, any cards that can be used there are essentially in play here. So you can use Robo Substitute, so your opponent doesn't take a prize when they get a KO. You can use Trevenant to block trainers. You can use Wobbuffet to block abilities. You can use Pyroar to stop basic Pokemon attacking. You would leave one of them active while you wasted a turn evolving, and then you'd go. So moving into promos then, we have two Mega EXs that have currently been released as promos, Mega Metagross and Mega Diancie. And they don't have Spirit Links, and I would be stunned if they have them. Firstly, they haven't had Spirit Links in Japan. And secondly, Pokemon has made it very clear through their actions that if the Mega EX comes in a set, in a little its own box, you ain't getting a Spirit Link. When they're giving you a playmat and a pin and everything else under the sun, I really don't think it'll be that big a deal to give a Spirit Link. And now that every Mega EX that comes out in a set has a Spirit Link, I really do find it frustrating that these ones that come out in their own little box don't have a Spirit Link, and I don't see any logical rationale for it, but apparently they ain't getting Spirit Links. You know, make of that what you will. Now, Mega Metagross does have potential. I like Mega Metagross. It does 130 damage plus 10 damage for each more metal energy. 170 if you've got all forward metal, and you can keep going. It can use double colours if you're struggling to get all the energy. But again, this kind of thing's going to work better in a Bronzong deck, and honestly, he's not as good as Aggron. We're going to talk about Aggron in a minute when we get on to Primal Clash. But if you want a Metal Mega EX, use Aggron. Not just because he's got a Spirit Link, he's also got a better attack. But Metagross is interesting. And the other promo Diancie is also interesting. 190 HP, which is low for a Mega EX, I'll give you that. 100 damage for free energy isn't that great. But during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to each of your Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX. What that means is that your opponent can't just bring something else active, which is fantastic. They can't just switch to a different bench Pokemon. They can't just rush in and retreat. There aren't many ways around this. This gives all of your Pokemon blanket immunity from all of your opponent's Pokemon EXs. And I like this. In a complete EX deck, your opponent's screwed. Completely and utterly screwed. Even decks like, Mega Rayquaza, they might put in a non-EX attacker. But if every single turn, and even 190 HP for a non-EX attacker is hard to do. And this is what makes Mega Diancie better. 190 HP sucks for a Mega EX when you're being hit by EX attackers. But most non-EXs aren't hitting 190 HP. Don't forget you can play this with Aromatisse, so you've got a Max Potion in play. All of your opponent are now immune to all of your opponent's Pokemon EX. That's amazing. However, I said blanket immunity. I apologise. I've made I haven't made an error. I've just not been clear enough. That only counts if Mega Diancie is active. So if your opponent switches to the bench, it goes. If they Lysandre, it goes. And I know that sucks, but hey-ho, that's the way it is. So what they could do is, Lysandre out your Aromatisse and kill it. Okay, so I was a little bit enthusiastic. I still like Diancie, just so we're clear. And I know I could go back and re-record that bit, but I quite like this podcast sounding authentic and conversational. I like Mega Diancie. It's let down by a lack of Spirit Link. Especially because essentially you just want a Geomancy, bam, attack. But interesting. Not amazing, but interesting. And to finish off, the Mega Pokemon EX that don't have a Spirit Link, let's look at the unreleased promos. Now, starting off with the one that we know is going to be released, we've got Mega Absol EX. And Mega Absol EX has one attack, which does essentially 80 damage for 2 dark. Discard the top card of your opponent's deck. If it's a trainer, it does 160. Trainer includes stadium, supporter, tool, etc. Most decks are half to 2/3 trainers. This is good. You got a good chance of doing 180 damage. There's no Spirit Links to stick a Muscle Band on. Sorry, 160, but with the Muscle Band, 180. And you're discarding a card which they're probably going to want to use a bit later. I mean, it could backfire if you discard a supporter they really want and they've got a VS Seeker in hand. But even then, at least you're making a waste of VS Seeker. Again, and I don't want to sound like a broken record here, the lack of Spirit Link hurts. But for this kind of deck, you could just leave an Evil Tower, a regular one active, 130 HP resistance to fighting. He's likely to last a turn or two. To be honest, though, the biggest problem with Mega Absol EX is, and it's going to sound a bit weird, he only takes 2 energy, and you've got regular Evil Tower that attaches energy. So you don't necessarily need a Mega Turbo. But he's kind of cool nonetheless. The other currently unreleased Mega EXs, I'm afraid, are kind of rubbish. There is a Swampert that's got an attack for 2 water and a double colourless, 130 damage. You can do 30 more. If so, each player discards the top 3 cards of their deck. Okay, you stick a Muscle Band on and you're doing 180, but you're also discarding 3 cards from your deck. And honestly, if you were to put 4 water energy onto a Caldeo, then, you'd be doing, 130 straight away, so, And then with a muscle band, it goes up to 150. It's fine, and it's workable. You can make a deck out of it, but there's just better cards. And then Mega Blaziken, 100 damage, and then the next turn does 100 more damage, just as long as he doesn't go to the bench. For 4 energy. It sucks. But not as much as the other Mega Gengar EX. By the other one, I mean not the one from Phantom Forces. 3 Psychic, 1 Colorless Energy, 120 damage, your opponent is poisoned and confused. Now, you can use Dimension Valley, so it goes down to 3 Psychic Energy, but there's no really good acceleration for Psychic Energy, and Poison, Confusion, and 120 damage is just a bit... It sucks. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I really don't like it. I'd rather just use Chandelure EX. There we go. So, that concludes my bit about ones that don't have Spirit Links. And you notice a lot of them there I said, yeah, but they don't have Spirit Link. There's ones that have potential. I think Diancie has potential. I think Metagross has potential. I think that the 2 Charizards have potential. The biggest problem, I think the Venusaur has potential. The biggest problem for most of them is not just the lack of Spirit Link, but the fact that there are other cards I'd rather play instead. But that brings me to the most recent sets. Because from Phantom Forces onwards, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Spirit Links. And now that we have Spirit Links, now we're talking. From this set onwards, there are some absolute beauties of Mega EXs, which I think we're going to need to take a very close look at. Firstly, and possibly, and I mentioned he was one of the examples I gave, possibly my favourite Mega EX to use with Mega Turbo, Mega Manectric EX. 110 damage for 2 energy, attach 2 basic energy cards from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. Now, Mega Manectric essentially keeps himself going and doesn't need Mega Turbo, because he only uses 2 energy to attack, and then he can just keep attaching to the bench. So as soon as you get 1 going, you're off. The biggest problem, of course, is what if you end up on a turn where you have no energy on Mega Manectric? I wouldn't play 4 Mega Turbo with Mega Manectric. I would play 1 or 2, but just on that turn where you don't have enough energy, use 1 plus your energy attachment for the turn, and then you can use him to build up a second one on the bench, and you're off. You've got a Spirit Link, so you don't need to waste a turn. You do need to wait a turn to evolve him, but he's also he's an electric type, and there's a lot of things like the Rayquaza deck is all weak to lightning. Now, I'm not going to talk much about the EXs because this is a podcast about Mega EXs, but it should also be borne in mind that there's a really good 1 energy attack for the regular Manectric, 20 plus 20 to the bench, which you can use in a turn before you evolve him. So you can still attack on that turn. So a very, very interesting card at least. I like Mega Manectric. And there's only one other from Phantom Forces, but I like this one as well. Mega Gengar EX. For a Psychic and a double Colorless, choose one of your opponent's attacks and use it as this attack. Now, the weird thing is that I like Mega Gengar EX moving forward. I think it's a very strong card. You've got double Colorless Energy, so it's 2 attachments. You've got Dimension Valley, so it's 2 attachments. So again, you don't really need Mega Turbo here. But if you bear in mind that there's cards like Mega Groudon, you copy this, you do 200 damage. You copy Rayquaza's attack, you can do a huge amount of damage. So you can kind of copy their attacks. But also, you've got the regular Gengar, which does hit and run, and you've got Trevenant and Wobbuffet. Abilities like Shaman, for instance, are going to be huge this format, especially Shaman. Trevenant with a Wally can be turn 1 train lock. You can Trevenant on the very first turn of the game, so your opponent never gets to play items for the entire game. So I like Mega Gengar EX, but it's not really because of Mega Turbo. It's because with the support Pokemon he can use, like Trevenant and Wobbuffet, bearing in mind that Trevenant and Wobbuffet, ladies and gentlemen, are psychic attackers that attack with psychic energy, so you can attack with them as well. And the fact that people are going to be, with things like Rayquaza, both the Mega Rayquazas, and things like Groudon, people are going to start using chunky Mega EXs pretty much for the first time, I think. Mega EXs are going to have a big impact on our format. Partly because they've just released better ones, partly because we've got the Spirit Links, and partly because we've got Mega Turbo. But Mega Gengar is primed to take advantage. I just don't really think he needs Mega Turbo. Again, I might put 1 or 2 in the deck just for turns when I really am stuck. But I don't mind missing a turn attacking with Gengar because, honestly, I'm going to be using Trevenant and Wobbuffet primarily. Mega Gengar's just going to come in for they've got a Groudon with 200, doing 200 damage. Better one-hit KO it with my Gengar Muscle Band. So, interesting, if nothing else. Moving forward into Primal Clash, not only do we still have Spirit Links, but now we've got full art Mega EXs that just look cool. And I like these. Essentially, pre-Phantom Forces, even if there was Spirit Links, I probably wouldn't want to play many of them. Phantom Forces onwards, it's like Pokemon turned around and went, you know what? Let's start printing really good Mega EXs. And it's almost like the decision to print good Mega EXs coincided with you know what? If we're going to print good Mega EXs, let's get rid of this ridiculous losing a turn when you evolve rule. Hence Spirit Links. You still have to lose a turn, but there's a mechanic to get around it. Now, the least exciting one for me is Mega Gardevoir. Purely because I think it's a good Pokemon. It's got a good attack. Free energy, 30 times the amount of fairy energy attached to all of your Pokemon. Honestly, you've got Geomancy. You've got regular Xerneas that puts 2 energy on the field per turn, and you want to be taking it all out of your deck. And if you're taking it out of your deck with Geomancy, there's going to be less left in your deck, so it's not going to end up in a discard pile. Maybe Mega Turbo would be good for Mega Gardevoir. I'm saying the word Mega so many times this podcast. Maybe Mega Turbo would be good for Mega Gardevoir, in that it's, good for mid-game recovery. But I still think Mega Gardevoir, it kind of fits in with a couple of the others, and although I like it, I'm not sure Mega Turbo is the best way to get going. One that I love for Mega Turbo, though, and this is I think this is almost a hidden gem of this podcast. The one that everyone else has forgotten, and while everyone else is trying to make Kyogre and Groudon and Rayquaza work with Mega Turbo, I think it's going to be Mega Aggron that runs under the radar. 120 damage for 2 metal and a double colourless. 120, flip a coin, if heads it does 120 more damage, if tails 20 damage to each of your bench Pokemon. We'll just put Mr. Mime in your deck and you're fine. But here, you've got Fliptini, it was reprinted in Legendary Treasures, so you've got a 75% chance of hitting heads. Now you're doing 240 for 4 energy, one of which can be a double colourless energy, and that's enough to one-hit KO Mega EXs. This bad boy I really like. Plus, for a lot of Mega EXs, you're thinking, oh man, I wish I could put a Muscle Band on for 20 more damage. Mega Aggron, he doesn't need 20 more damage. You're happy just putting the Spirit Link on him. I really like Mega Aggron. Bronzong was never quite fast and consistent enough. Mega Aggron, if you've got a very well-built deck, turn 2... essentially, turn 1, you attach an energy. Turn 2, 1 Mega Turbo, 1 DCE, boom, you're off. Now, this, I think, would need to be played as a speed deck. And if you want to know more about speed decks, go back a couple of weeks. You would be playing it with Shaymin, and you would be playing it with Bicycle and Acrobike and all of that. Just trying to run through your deck as quick as you possibly could, and then Lysandre's trump card everything right back in again. And you can afford to use Shaymin in a deck like this because you've got an EX hitting for 240 damage. If your opponent is going to take out Shaymin using their attackers, you're just going to have an Aggron to take out their attacker. Brilliant. You've both had 2 prizes, but you've lost a support Pokemon you didn't need. They've lost their attacker and a bunch of energy. I really like Mega Aggron. And if there's one kind of hidden gem to take away from this podcast, I take Mega Aggron. Kyogre and Groudon are both brilliant. And absolutely, you should be thinking Mega Turbo. Primal Kyogre, free water energy, 1 colourless, 150 damage, move 2 energy to one of your bench Pokemon, and do 30 to every Pokemon EX. That includes every Shaymin, every Jirachi. And of course, when you've done 30 damage to the EXs, that 150 damage for Tidal Storm starts looking like a one-hit KO pretty goddamn quickly. I like Primal Kyogre. The biggest problem, Primal Kyogre... Oh, and you can attach 2 energy per turn, just in case Mega Turbo wasn't good enough. The problem with Primal Kyogre was, even with Alpha Growth, it just wasn't quite fast enough. You don't need it to be that fast anymore on its own, because you've got Mega Turbo. I love this. And I also love Groudon. Similarly, you've got, 1 attack, and it's crazy. 4 energy, 100 damage. If there's a stadium in play, 200, and discard the stadium. Now, I've made this point on the podcast before. Go back to my YouTube channel. Just search PTCG Radio on YouTube. You'll find it. Not forgotten, by the way, top 5 cards from Roaring Skies are going to be going up end of this week, beginning of next. No prizes for guessing what's number 1. Just so we're clear. It's going to be Shaman. Because otherwise I'd just be wrong. Sorry. But still watch it. It's going to be awesome. Top 10 cards from Roaring Skies. It's going to be a blast. But in my YouTube channel, and everywhere else, I made a point of saying that the first Groudon isn't the problem. You're probably going to get the first Groudon out. But the second Groudon's a problem. The first Groudon's going to go down. You might take 4 prizes and then it goes down. It's going to go down. And, then you end up having very little to use. But when Groudon goes down, you've got energy in a discard pile. Mega Turbo comes in. Boom. You are off. It's another deck where you'll need the full complement of 4 Mega Turbos. I love the Mega EXs from this set with Mega Turbo. Yeah, Gardevoir's probably better with Aromatisse and Geomancy. But I think Aggron, Kyogre and Groudon could all be really, really good here. I really, really like them. And that brings us to the most recent set, Roaring Skies. Just to confirm, it came out in the US on the 6th of May, which means it is legal for tournament play 21 days later, the 21st of May. Which means that is going to be... It's going to be legal for tournament play on the 27th. So 6th of May it comes out, 21 days later, 27th of May. For people in the UK, that's 3 days before UK Nationals, which is going to be exciting. There are some events going on in the UK if you want to start testing for Nationals. One's actually going on in Coventry this weekend. Search for it on Facebook. It's easy to find. Just search Coventry Pokemon. I'm pretty sure you'll find it. I'm going to be going along because it's a league challenge followed by a Roaring Skies winner box. Of course, I don't own any Roaring Skies yet because I'm going to be getting a couple of boxes from working Nationals, and I'm not going to be playing Nationals, so I don't need them till after Nationals. So I'm just waiting to get my boxes then. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know if I'm going to play the winner box. I don't know if I can be bothered. What I am, however, going to be playing is the league challenge. It might be one last run out for Donphan, or I might play a bit of Manectric. But I only own 1 Manectric, no Megas. So if I can borrow some Manectric, I think I'm going to have a roll with that. Otherwise, it's going to be all about the old Donphan. And then we'll see if I want to play the winner box afterwards. But if you're in Coventry this weekend, go along, say hello. To Mega EXs. Now, there's 4 in the set, and I quite like all of them. Now, one I do like is Mega Gallade. Now, we're going to be talking in the next couple of weeks. The podcasts are going to be dedicated to new decks from Roaring Skies, including, Shaman Trevenant, including Mega Gallade Bats, and we're probably also going to do a bit of a chat about a bit of a feature, shall we say, on decks that get better. We do this quite a lot on the podcast, or I do this quite a lot on the podcast after a set comes out. We do a bit about new decks and a bit about, how old decks are affected. And we're going to do that over the next couple of weeks. We've got, time before Nationals. Actually, we don't have much time before Nationals. In fact, we've only got 2 more podcasts for Nationals. So maybe we'll get that done over the next couple of weeks. But even that aside, Mega Gallade EX is good. Now, the attack, it's got 1 attack that takes a Psychic colourless. You pop a Dimension Valley down, it's just 2 colourless energy. 1 attachment, 1 Mega Turbo, you could easily get him powered up in 1 turn, which I like. Now, you've got to get Gallade down for a turn before you can Mega Evolve him, but you got the Spirit Link there, and I'm a big fan, as I mentioned all the time, probably too much. Pokemon that can attack in 1 turn, either with 1 energy or that can be going in 1 turn, like this Gallade. And I think it's brilliant, because it does 110 damage, and 30 damage to any bench Pokemon that have damage counters on it. Now, you need to get damage counters on there. There is a Spindo, which does 10 damage to all the Pokemon for colourless energy. Bit of a sacrificial lamb, but again, if you just use Gallade for the rest of the game, you're playing a 7-prize game. That Spinder going down makes no difference. Or you can play it with bats and just make sure you hit a different Pokemon with the bat every time, so you're doing that. But, 110 damage for 1 energy is pretty good, especially when you're doing 30 damage to the bench. And that's why you play it with bats. You use your Golbat and your Crobat to hit the bench, and then you're doing 30 damage to all of them as you go. Now, I know it's free energy, but Dimension Valley, Mega Turbo, it's only one proper attachment, and you're doing 110 damage. I really like him. I'm also a big fan of Mega Latios EX. Now, let's not forget that Latios EX is donkerific, but, 40 damage on the first turn of the game. But as I made the point last week, if you're just relying on a card that can get the KO on the first turn of the game, you're really not going to be doing all that well. You'll win some games by donks. You'll win games of early pressure. You don't need to donk a lot of the time. Donk, for newer listeners, being when you knock out a Pokemon on your first turn of the game to win. If it's not your first turn of the game, you haven't donked them, you've benched them. Just so we're clear. But sometimes you're going to get early pressure, and you're going to win from that. But if you don't, you need something else. Now, Mega Latios, free energy, water, psychic, colourless. Discard 2 energy attached to this Pokemon. Does 120 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Essentially, you use this attack to pick Shaymins off the bench. Shaymin have 110 HP. You use this to kill Shaymin on the bench. Now, of course, that's easily gotten around with Mr. Mimebush. Because the thing here is, you use Mega Turbo once, and then you use Double Dragon Energy, and you've got the free energy you need. Mega Turbo, any energy you like, because it's a colourless energy, and then Double Dragon it on. So you don't even need any specific energy to use Mega Latios. You can use whatever other Pokemon you like. You can use whatever basic energy you like. And as long as you're playing 4 Double Dragon energy, Mega Latios will just fit right in. And you can get him going on, in one turn. All you need to do is go Double Dragon energy, Mega Turbo. And you're up and running. Now, the first Mega Latios, to be honest with you, you're probably not going to need Mega Turbo, because you're going to put the Psychic Energy on turn 1 to try and donk, or at least put on early pressure. Second turn, you're going to Mega Revolve and put on Double Dragon Energy. But later in the game, you essentially need to put a Double Dragon Energy on Mega Latios every turn to snipe. 2 problems with that. Firstly, you are not going to be able to pull a Double Dragon Energy every turn. But when you can't pull a Double Dragon Energy, 1 Mega Turbo, 1 energy attachment, and you've got the 2 energy you need. Secondly, if your Mega Latios goes down, just attaching a double... let's say that every single turn you can get a Double Dragon Energy, using Lissandra's trump card running for your deck and always just being able to get it back out again. Even then, when Mega Latios goes down, you're going to need free energy. Double Dragon won't do it. 1 Mega Turbo, Double Dragon Energy, and you're off. I like Mega Latios. He doesn't hit for enough. So the thing I have to say about Mega Latios is, honestly, I don't quite think he's hits hard enough. I'm not saying don't use him. I'm saying you can't, I don't believe, just go with a Mega Latios deck. I like Latios for early pressure. I like Mega Latios for hitting the bench and for taking out Shaymins, etc. But if your opponent has nothing on the bench to hit or has a Mr. Mime out, and you haven't donked them, do you really want to just be doing 120 damage to their active while they might be one-hit KOing you? The answer is, well, clearly not. And I'm not going to talk very much about the Rayquazas, the last ones in the set, because honestly, I want to give them... When we talk about new decks next week, I want to go through them properly. What I will say is, colourless Rayquaza, we've talked about a lot. Double colourless, he's got Delta Revolution and a Spirit Link, so you can get him going on turn 1. Mega Turbo plus DCE gives free energy on turn 1. He can get going on turn 1. He's crazy good. As for the Dragon Mega Rayquaza, and just as a side note, no full art Mega Rayquaza Dragon makes me sad. I love the Mega Rayquaza Dragon, more so than most people. Because here's the deal. You've got Reshiram to attach energy, and you've got Double Dragon Energy, and you've got Mega Turbo. And let's not forget that although you don't have Winona to search out Shaymin, you've got Fiery Torch and Scorched Earth that help you to draw cards. I think there is a strong argument to be made that Mega Rayquaza EX Dragon is better than Mega Rayquaza Colourless. Yes, it takes a bit more energy. Yes, it doesn't have Delta Revolution, but it also doesn't have a punishing weakness to Lightning. Yes, I know Altaria gets rid of the weakness if you can get Altaria out straight away every game. And if you think you're going to be able to do that, ladies and gentlemen, well, firstly, you're hitting a Winona on the first turn of the game every time, and you don't need a Shaman or a Rayquaza. It's just not realistic, let's put it that way. And it doesn't rely on having a full bench. And it doesn't rely on having your stadium out. You're just doing 300 damage. You're just doing 300 damage. So, you don't need a full bench. You don't need a specific stadium. And it doesn't have as bad a weakness. And as well as Mega Turbo and Double Dragon, you've also got Reshiram. I'm not going to go into any more detail about them yet, because next week when we look at new decks, I'm going to essentially make a proper argument that I think Dragon Rayquaza EX could be better than Colourless. Although, just to be clear, I am making the argument largely as a contrarian, because everyone's talking about Colourless, no one's talking about Dragon, so I think it's worth talking about Dragon just to give a bit of a counterpoint. Whether it's actually better or not, I don't know, is the honest answer. I think time will tell, but I think all of those people that are just blindly going for Colourless Rayquaza and ignoring Dragon Rayquaza, I think that they are essentially... I think they're overlooking a lot of stuff. I think it's one of those, I'm rushing straight to the next big deck, rather than actually sitting down and figuring out, what's really quite good. So, with that in mind, I think it's time to sign off. Just having a quick look through Facebook, everyone's just going, Luigi has a new Mewtwo, Luigi has a new Mewtwo. Brilliant. But, just to be clear, it's not weak to itself, which was one of the big things about Mewtwo. And also, if Mewtwo was still amazing, people would still be playing Mewtwo. Did that feel like an uncomfortably long silence? Anyway, that is it for this week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for listening, as always. If you want to get hold of me, if you think I've missed anything, if I did forget any Mega EX, I went through 23, but if I did forget one, let me know, and we will go through it next week. If you think I've missed anything, let me know. If there are any new decks you think I should be aware of coming out of Roaring Skies, again, let me know. You can email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or you can tweet me at the Wassy. Thank you very much for listening. Look after yourself till next week. My name is Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.